swimming pools, true story. One of my brothers is a CPA by training, and years ago, he was called in to go to a state university, which I will not name, to audit all the books in the state university. And so when he went, he discovered they had a swimming pool, which is a very small swimming pool. I mean, it's not an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It's, I forget how big, but something you might have, you know, at the local rec center. But yet, then he discovered the state university had purchased about an $80,000 timer. You know, you've seen the Olympics, and you've seen that big square box of the really expensive timer. So they bought one for that, but none that was suitable for the swimming pool. So we asked, why did you? They said, well, we had the money to spend. So, we are neither going to install a swimming pool, nor foolishly spend any money like that. So I'm going to turn, at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Nancy.
Morning. You all will recognize the prayer of the Property Committee. That was the first thing that we did when we organized this committee, was to create our prayer. And that prayer guided us through all our work, and that prayer appeared, as you know, in our order of worship during the course of the summer and the early fall when we had our listening sessions. Our committee was constituted actually by Father Tim. He appointed us all, and we met for the first time, I think it was in the mid to end of May, and had the benefit of the very wise counsel of Peggy Brennan and Don Taggart, who were so helpful in sharing with us their experience, their tips, their advice on the process, essentially, because they had done some of the same thing during the search for our rector. As you would remember, we had quite an extensive search process then, and so we benefited tremendously from their shared experience. So we were constituted as a committee of 6, plus Darren Williams and Debbie Braun as ex officio members of the vestry. And the 6 members are, and I'm going to have them stand up, Ann Branham cannot be here today, but she was our chaplain. Then Tom Pettit, you want to stand up, please? And Joe Steele, and yeah, absolutely. And Laura Van Wyck, and also Stephanie Meadows. So this was our committee, and when you heard repeatedly when you heard Father Tim, speak repeatedly about Nancy's committee and Nancy this and Nancy that, it's not. This is the group. We worked together as a group, and it was a wonderful group to work with. I really considered it a privilege. So what did we do? Well, we didn't have an awful lot of time, so we got right at it. We knew we needed to recruit, let me back up a minute. What our charge was to give each and every one of you, each and every parishioner, the opportunity to voice your ideas, your suggestions, your hopes, your dreams for ministries at St. Andrews, both currently but also in the future in the context of our new expanded property. And during this process, we began to identify that property, for reasons you'll see shortly, as the new St. Andrews campus. So with that charge, we were also supposed to record all your ideas and comments, which we did. And in fact, we have probably one of the longest Excel spreadsheets going. But anyway, we've recorded all your ideas and comments. And we also needed at the same time to define a format for our meeting with you. And so what we did was we defined this listening session format that we thought would give people the opportunity to first get to know one another a little bit, because we were bringing together people who had signed up, who had found spaces in our Sign Up Genius, which was online, or they signed up on sign-up sheets out in the parish hall. And many of you didn't necessarily know one another, which was really a good thing, actually. We thought it was quite an interesting thing. So the format of each meeting was for the host of the meeting to introduce the session, and then the mediator from our committee then took on the role of mediating the discussion. But we started out, first of all, with this round of introductions, and it was just delightful to see how many connections people had beyond this parish that they didn't even know about. I didn't know you came from that church. You know, I worshiped there and so on. It was just really quite wonderful. And then we had also crafted, as a committee, a group of 4 focus questions, because we wanted to be certain that the outcome of what we were working on with you all was what was in line, essentially, with our charge, which was to come up with ideas about ministry. So we came up with 4 questions that we hoped would provoke interesting discussion, and in fact they did. And so we focused on those 4 questions. We also had an important visual, which we have here, and I'll show you on the slide in a second as well. The visual was a to-scale drawing of our new campus. And most importantly, it showed very definitively the center section, which is, in fact, the new section. And we also shared with everybody at those listening sessions the mission of St. Andrews. And we'll talk a little bit about how we did that in just a second. Let me go back here just a minute. We've covered all but the actual invitation, and that was an important document. The invitation that we issued to each and every one of you had not only the specifics about your hosts and where they were located and so on, but it also had the prayer of the property committee. It also included those 4 questions. It included the names of all of us on the property committee. And it included the mission statement of St. Andrews. So all of you have that in your hand to review, in many instances ahead of time. We tried to hand them out ahead of time when we could. Some of them we emailed ahead of time. So that invitation was an important piece of the process as well. As I mentioned, we logged all comments, and after each listening session, the day after, the Sunday after, we also hosted informal Q&A sessions. We didn't have a lot of attendance at those. We had a few people pop in, but it turned out not to be as big a draw as the listening sessions. And then one other mode of communication we offered parishioners was an email that was dedicated to listening at standards.net. And we did receive a few emails, but less than 10. Again, the preferred method or the preferred element of our process we were delighted to see was, in fact, all of you signing up and attending our listening sessions. We also advertised heavily in the, as you may recall, in the Sunday nets and also in the monthly nets. And we had a lot of support from the pulpit from Father Tim and Father Sandy. So that was very helpful as well. So this was the mission statement of St. Andrews that was very important and front and center on your invitation. And This was the property plat that we showed at each and every listening session. And as you can see, that middle section, this middle section that's outlined, that represents the new property. So we really go from a church property that was a U to a campus. So outcomes and discussion areas. Interestingly enough, we found that as we were reviewing our Excel spreadsheet, that the comments that we received pretty much fell within 11 general categories, and those categories are listed up above here on the slide. We had 8 listening sessions in private homes. We held 3 listening sessions at St. Andrews. One of those listening sessions held at St. Andrews was devoted specifically to the youth of St. Andrews. And also the sessions that were at St. Andrews also, we made available childcare for anyone who needed childcare as well. We had about, intentionally, we limited the sign-ups to 10 to 13 individuals, again, coming out of recommendations from past process, wanting to have a more intimate gathering in which people would feel free to discuss their ideas. The total number of people who attended those listening sessions was 137. And out of that, new friendships evolved as well. So it really wound up being not only a very important activity in terms of collecting your ideas and hearing your thoughts and your dreams, but it also became an important fellowship opportunity, which was really pretty wonderful for those of us that were involved with this process. So the discussion areas were formation, fellowship, Fairfax County related, landscape outreach, preschool programs, safety and security, worship, youth, and general. And as part of that process, each member of the committee took ownership over 1 or 2 of those areas and were instrumental in helping analyze and summarize those sections of the report. Now again, these discussion areas weren't prescribed by anyone. The comments just simply sort of seem to fall in those discussion areas. And I would say that certainly one of the areas that got the most comment was outreach. And that was really heartening. It's no surprise to us because the search committee had told us that outreach was reported to have been in our DNA. And in fact, it clearly is, because here it is again in the listening session, in the context of listening sessions. And it was spoken about a lot. Does any of you have anything you want to add, Joe or Laura, at this point? Tom, yes.
Well, I was just going to say, in the actual report that we gave, this is a copy of it, the 29 pages are all your comments. It goes on and on and on. And actually, some of the comments made at the very first listening session were repeated again and again and again. And they became the consensus items of things in outreach and programs and all these different categories that we heard from you all, and these are the things you're...
That's right. And we will be, just for your information, we'll also be sharing the report summary, a little bit more detailed than what you're going to see up here today. We'll be sharing it on the church website within the next week or so. So be looking for that, and you'll see more detail in each of the topical areas. So major findings. I have 4 slides of major findings, and interestingly enough, it turns out we could consolidate them into essentially 11, very similar to our categories, 11 major findings. So the first one, repurpose the kitchen space and provide a new kitchen to better serve fellowship, program, and outreach needs of the parish. The second, explore outdoor worship options. And there were lots of neat ideas here. The labyrinth, the amphitheater, expanded the memorial garden, just quiet spaces in which to sit and reflect and pray. And also wonderful spaces for fellowship outdoors. Construct environmentally sensitive, multi-use buildings that can be used for congregational activities, for youth activities, including dedicated teen space. That was really an important point. And space for senior activities, as well as space for at-risk individuals in the greater Burke community. Strategically expand designated storage areas to better serve ministries and programs. We all need to know that St. Andrews has a great need for not only more storage, but strategically planned storage. Consider site access concerns, including safety, aesthetics, signage, visibility to newcomers and to visitors. We want to be a welcoming community. We don't want to be the best kept secret in Fairfax County. Upgrade and expand classroom spaces for preschool and church school, including bathrooms. So that was an important discussion point, definitely, to upgrade the preschool and classroom spaces. Expand and relocate the playground to the wooded area. That was in keeping with the fact that if it were in the wooded area, it would be a much more safe and comfortable place to be in the summertime. It gets very, very hot out on that playground during the summer months. Upgrade church bathrooms to include shower and laundry. This was a bit of a nod of the head to outreach, to facets, to echo to our hypothermia program. So that was repeated several times throughout. Balance the needs of the parish with the needs of the people outside our doors through a comprehensive strategic planning process. There was, at every meeting, there was a concern expressed of the importance of balancing this need to reach out and do things for others, as well as taking care and nourishing all that we are and all that we can be as a community. It's a dynamic process. It goes both ways, but that was a clear concern. It can't be all one way or the other way. It can't be all about us or all about everybody else. There has to be some mutual nourishment going on there. Consider partnering with other entities beyond St. Andrews as we expand our outreach programs. There was talk about, other churches, other community organizations that we might be able to partner with in some of our outreach ministry. Expand and upgrade office space with the provision for future growth. And that is also a nod to the notion that it also needs to provide for future growth in staff, for future growth in programs. We definitely need, it was called from the rooftops, really, we really do need better space for our office staff. So at this point, I want to take a moment and offer our special thanks as a committee to all the people that hosted the listening sessions. And I want to also pay tribute to the child care providers, who I hope are here. I don't know if they are. They might be washing cars. But anyway, it was terrific. The people who stepped forward and were willing to host these sessions. And I think we all had quite a wonderful experience. Do any of you have anything you want to add to any one of those? Would you please the microphone?
I think Nancy pretty much said it, but the 11 points started with the kitchen. They're not in any order. We didn't rank them. It doesn't mean kitchen is number 1 and whatever was number 11 is number 11. We made no attempt to rank them. That's part of what comes next by the next group. And the other thing is we did, and Joe pointed this out at one time in a rather pointed email, is that we didn't consider cost, we didn't consider safety.
add too that at the same time that we were going through our process of listening to you all, Father Tim and others were collecting information from Fairfax County representatives, from local organizations, getting input on what would you like to see a place like St. Andrew's Church be able to do in our community? What more might we be able to do to better serve our community? So you'll be hearing more from Father Tim about that shortly. And I would add this last slide. This is really Tim and Melinda's slide. What's next? Because of course, as Father Tim mentioned this morning in his sermon, that's on everybody's minds. Where do we go from here? It's a process, and it's not going to be divine and done tomorrow. It's a process. It's going to take a while. And with that, I'll turn it over to Melinda and Tim to discuss the points on this slide and anything else that you think might be helpful.
Let's thank all of the
What's next? We wanted to just do a little bit of a discussion, tag team between Tim and I, on some of the things that were next. You got a flavor of a lot of the ideas today, I think, which was great. And once again, no real surprises except for some things, swimming pool, things like that. But I think overall, it really, for us, it really focuses to think about some of the highlights of what really came out of that. And some of the things that were really, that resonated to me, and I know the rest of the vestry, were just the ideas. It's not just about the buildings, it's about the programs we have. So as we move forward and we start to sift through what some of these ideas are, and to look to see what are some of the kinds of things that we need to consider, there'll be other discussion groups, and as Nancy said, a lot of the information that came about from the wonderful sessions in terms of discussions, that fellowship that's there, people are asking, are we going to have listening sessions about anything else? So that's a positive thing. Some of the next steps for us that we have been working on to help give some context to some of these ideas today is you saw the first item up there was a special use permit. And what that is with the property being where it is adjacent to our church, we have a special permit here which makes us tax exempt and also requires that we do certain things with the county. We are in the process right now. We have a retainer in place with a qualified attorney who we've been working with for several months to help put together the special use permit that we need to incorporate that property into our current special use permit that we have. It's not just about becoming tax exempt. It also helps pave the way for many other things that we need to do in Fairfax County, be it permits, be it many different pieces to this process. We were fortunate that we interviewed a couple different attorneys, and we were fortunate to be able to have an individual who's actually done church planning in the area. And the highlight there is he knows the process, he knows a lot of people in the county, so all those kinds of things are, of course, a great advantage. Special use permits being worked on now. It's going to take a couple months to get that in place. It's not just a paperwork exercise. The attorney has to meet with certain people. They don't anticipate that there will be any problems or any issues with that, but stay tuned. The other thing that was on the slide was an idea in terms of a special use permit, sort of the timing when we do decide what we're going to build. We'll have to go back in and incorporate another type of permit into whatever we do in terms of getting that. Some of the things that came out of the discussions also kind of led us to think about, are there some things that we could be doing to get ready? Are there some things that we could be doing now, maybe that don't cost a lot of money? One is to increase some of the visibility. You may have seen that there's been some clearing done around the property now, which is great, so that you have more visibility. And I think one of the categories of discussion that came up a lot at the listening sessions was, how can we make the church more visible from the road? actually change the entrances, do those kind of things, but we have underway some new signage that's going to be going in. We also have some additional arrangements that we're making to have some of the road cleared, so you can maybe actually, as Sandy said, see the red doors from the road. So we'll be working on that, which I think is a good piece to also include visibility of St. Andrews as people drive by, more importantly on the side street side. Some of the other things that come into play after we get the special use permit will be to actually bring on board an engineering consultant firm, not a huge number of people, but a firm that can actually, or individuals that are skilled and have some good experience in looking at, these are some of the ideas, what's scalable to the property, what really makes sense, and actually build in some of the space utilization aspects of that property. Is it multi-use building? How big would it be? What would it be used for? What are some of the combinations? And I think after the special use permit, getting that engineering piece in there will be critical. It's not just engineering to have the sake of engineering. They will come up with what we call a master plan. Based on that master plan, that will be a very informative piece of information that we'll be able to look at across the time to see what kinds of things would work best there. Also, I wanted to say, in part of the context of this, there's a lot that's going on as listening sessions are going on with outreach to the county. And maybe I thought you could talk a little bit about, Tim, some of the experiences you've had meeting with some of the county officials.
Before that, one of the suggestions was we explore ways to find partnerships with either other churches or other agencies in Fairfax County. So I wanted to ask Sandy to come and speak about some of the work he is doing in that area.
So part of the work for the doctoral things, you heard all about this in church, the Great September Experiment, a bunch of other things. One of the other things that I did was to try to get an understanding of what is Burke, who is here, what is Springfield, and to that end, we actually had a community leaders breakfast in this space. We invited people from the schools, from the school district, all sorts of different parts of the community to get together in this room, have a free breakfast. I guarantee that it would only be 45 minutes. And it was not about us talking, but it was about us listening to hear what their ideas for the community, what are the needs of Burke, West Springfield. And what we found was a lot of these folks did not know each other at all. They knew sort of some of the things existed. So my thought that this place was fairly compartmentalized was absolutely true. And they really appreciated getting to know each other, and they can't wait until we have another one. Ironically, trying to figure out what it is we could be doing as a community that we're not doing, the first thing is no one is doing the, hey, let's get together and talk. We actually fill the niche by trying to figure out what niche we should fill. And I have a feeling that that's something we're going to continue to do. It's a new ministry possibility for St. Andrews and a new excitement in actually the community. So those we're in contact with, it was probably the note went out to, I'm going to say around 40 different individuals from around. They didn't all come, but there's a lot of interest, and even the people who didn't come, for the most part, said, please keep me on the mailing list. So we'll see what comes of that.
Yeah, for instance, the director from ECHO came and had never met the principal from West Springfield, even though they're just a few miles apart. So those kind of
West Springfield, which
high school, West Springfield. So those are kind of relationships when we sat down and realized they had never met one another. And so that's a big step toward addressing this.
Well, and the point with that one actually is ECHO has bought some software for language learning that they were hoping to use in the schools, and it didn't work out as much as they could. I mean, ECHO bought it for themselves. So that language program is actually being used in West Springfield. So there's a tie with what they're doing, but they hadn't actually met.
Again, going back to being good stewards of the resources that we have is quite important. So a number, it feels like quite I met with several people. I met with Pat Harity. Soon all of you know who Pat Harity is, Dave Albo, and Dave Marston. And just to ask...
For those of us who aren't familiar, so the first guy is the Board of Supervisors, and the other two are...
And Dave Marston and Dave Albo were both Commonwealth, not representatives, delegates. As a senator. So I met with all of them separately and just basically opened the table, opened the floor to get their feedback. What is the community need? What was interesting is they were all three incredibly consistent. Their suggestion was to look at something in the area of elder care. And elder care is a huge spectrum. Elder care can go from respite care, adult daycare, all the way through nursing homes, assisted living, the Green Spring model. So it's a very wide spectrum. However, they all indicated that Fairfax County demographics are rapidly changing such that it's no longer that place where young couples with children who work for the government came and moved to. It's now a lot of folks 55 and older. And in a place that is, as you all know, not the most inexpensive place to live either. And so they suggested we explore options for some kind of elder care, whether that's adult daycare, etc. So that was their suggestion. They all pledged to do as much as they could to help support us. I respect all three of these gentlemen, but you know they are politicians, and so I did not take their "I pledge to support you" to be a check we will put in the bank account next week. But I do anticipate their assistance. In fact, Pat Harity, already within a few days of meeting him, Jewel Gould and I actually met with Pat Harity. He put us in contact with people in his office to help answer any of those practical questions that may come up. So I think those relationships are going to be very helpful. I've also asked Jewel to begin contacting the three most immediate homeowner association groups with those directors, not the whole homeowners association. I don't want to go stand in front of, you know, homeowners in Fairfax County to get their support, but I am going to meet, Jewel and I are going to meet with the directors of those associations to let them know that we have this property, we are going to be developing it for some use. We don't want to catch you by surprise. I was very clear with all the representatives. I will be clear with the homeowners association to relieve them. We're not building a strip mall. We're not going to put in a McDonald's next door. Although one parishioner told me if it were a Chick-fil-A. So I've assured our neighbors we're not going to do anything garish or out of hand. We are going to try to keep as much of the trees and the essence of the property as we possibly can. A lot of that will be determined by this master plan that engineers will come in and indicate what may need to change, etc. So while there are many things on the table, I appreciate what Tom said. There is sort of a consistency of 3 or 4 big ideas like that. And so that's a wonderful thing that we are moving to. As Jewel and I meet with the local homeowners, directors, I'll keep you abreast of that. Melinda and I and the next vestry, next senior ward, will keep all of you abreast in the weekly, monthly net on the website about all of these conversations and then what is next. As Melinda mentioned, you probably have already seen some changes to the property. You can now see the church as you make that left and drive in. I have contracted with an individual to continue to do that work, to clear out the undergrowth that you see, so that when we do get to the point that other contractors, engineers come to the property, they can actually do their work and not have to tramp through the forest next door. So here in the next few weeks, a good bit of the property will look like it does here on this corner. Melinda mentioned that we have to find a religious use of our property because of tax reasons. We've already had a religious use. If you are at the animal blessing, the pet blessing, back in October, that was our first religious use of the property. And the dogs really appreciated being on the property. And some other things we're going to explore and offer will be, certainly before it gets much colder, outdoor worship, perhaps a Eucharist, outdoor chapel with the preschool students, possibly creating an outdoor prayer area that you can go and walk and meditate. That's a little more complicated to construct and build. It's not as easy as clearing a little land. So those are some of the things that we are currently planning for and looking at doing. One of the other questions that came up with the committee and a number of you was, okay, what about the house? We are planning to demolish the house. By the way, I shared that with the Grahams, even during the negotiation process. Out of respect to the Grahams, we have determined, with the help of an inspector, it is really not suitable for use. I'll just, out of respect, everyone leave it at that. So, just in case you're wondering, the Grahams are well aware of this. Before they moved, a few weeks ago, Melinda and I and a few others met one afternoon and had a special time of prayer and sharing before they moved. So their family came and joined them, and they told stories about growing up in the house, a story about it being haunted. I'm not making that up. I was sharing that. And so it was a way to give them a chance to cry, to say goodbye to the house. They lived in for 38 years. So it was a big deal to say goodbye to that house and property. And I've spoken to them. They are in Ashby Pond. They are doing well, getting used to living around other people, especially compared to where they were. So they're excited, and virtually every time I talk to Warren and Nancy, they say the church should have that property. We've always wanted the church to have it. So they feel good, and it was the right thing to do to give it to all of us to use. So, exciting things in store and coming. As I mentioned in my sermon, as Nancy mentioned, I can't answer that question to say by March of 2015 there's going to be a structure there. Because number one, that ain't going to happen by March of 2015. The vestry will continue to look at all the suggestions. The vestry is currently pulling together a strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years. And so that strategic plan will include what we can do with these suggestions and what is feasible. And then, of course, that wonderful thing that we will have to do at some point, and that is raise money for whatever we can do. I want to let you know that we are not going to have a capital campaign in 2015. Particularly in light of we're in the middle of the stewardship campaign. I wanted to answer that question for you. There's not going to be a capital campaign anytime soon. But we will continue to work among the vestry, and then with the new vestry next year to further flesh out these wonderful suggestions. I was impressed by the participation and the suggestions. I was taken by the unanimity of sorts among everyone, the consistency. And then mainly, what might be really the most important thing for all of us long term is that people got to know one another and got to hear their story and how they came to St. Andrews. And so that was wonderful to see. It was also wonderful to see some people, as a result of the listening session, say, you know what, I'd also like to now volunteer to do this and help out in this way. So all that is wonderful to see. Just because we all sat down and talked to each other. An amazing, wonderful, simple thing of talking and hearing each other's story. I find it never really fails to do good things. And those all the hype.
The only other thing I was going to mention, we did embark on a capital reserve study, which is in addition to looking at this property, let's not forget about this. What do we have to do over the next 5 to 10 years to sustain what we have here? And I can tell you, after a 45-page report, we're actually in pretty good shape. We're in better shape than we thought. That's good for our assets here. But one thing that plan does do, and Darren Williams took that on and did a really great job getting a lot of that actually put into plain English, but it kind of gives us a roadmap for looking at what we have to do to sustain the heating, the roof, carpeting, all these kinds of things. So we have a really good feel now as we're looking over here to look at the totality of everything and say, well, what do we really need to plan into our budget, which is what the vestry is working on right now in terms of looking at how we can fold that in. So that's another key ingredient with the strategic plan, so we can really look at this more holistically across the board, as Tim said, so that we can really look to see what kinds of things are going to make sense, what the community needs, and what will be good for St. Andrews.
And that's great timing to remind all of you the November 1 fall cleanup.
9
So 9 o'clock. So if you'd like to come and walk around our new campus, our new campus, feel free to join us. We have a few minutes left. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Does the fund for the trustees of the fund for the property still exist, or is that closed?
Alice had a good question. The Ministry for Tomorrow campaign that started a number of years ago essentially paid for the property in cash. That's always a good thing, right? To be able to, particularly that large. And there is about $80,000 remaining, which will pay for a number of other things, permits, other things that we have to do.
Could we use that to make designated contributions for
Yes,
progress?
yes, if you still would like to contribute, that fund is still open.
Definitely.
Yeah, that fund is still open. If you would like to make a designated fund to that. You would simply just write in the memo section, new property. We'll-
And I will say too, you mentioned the Board of Trustees, and that's an important part of this parish. Don Taggart, Doris James, and Chris Conrad have been very helpful and very involved in terms of as we move through each step of this process. So I did want to assure you that they have been involved and have given us great insight into a lot of the planning and things that they're coming to.
And that reminds me, I've also spoken with people in the diocese, Bishop Johnston and Mike Kerr, who was the treasurer, he now has a different position in the diocese. They are very happy for us. They knew this has been years in the making. And they, of course, have pledged their support because, just as a reminder, in the Episcopal Church, this is now their property, not ours. But they have pledged their support to help us. I will incidentally mention that one focus right now in the diocese is in the realm of elder care. Church of the Resurrection in Alexandria, off Seminary Road. It's where Joe Belzer is the priest in charge. Bishop Johnston, diocesan leaders, and the vestry were in conversations over the past 3 years to close Church of the Resurrection because the attendance had gotten to the point, and they had a six-figure debt as well. So they were facing a very tough time. Somewhere along the way, they're next to Goodwin House, all the high rises right there on Seminary. Somewhere along the way, they came up with a creative idea. So they've contracted with a nonprofit agency that is going to build a high-rise, affordable senior living. Not marketed to people who can afford Goodwin House, but to find that demographic that needs more affordable senior living. And they are going to build that above the property. And Church of the Resurrection will be on the first 2 floors. So it's a very creative way. And the church is leasing back that space from this company. And it was a very creative way to say we're going to meet the community need while also meeting a need we have. And so I plant that seed, not necessarily a high-rise, affordable, but I plant that seed to be open to God's Spirit and creativity or whatever might be.
Tim, can you speak to, there's a diocesan initiative in play right now, a task force that is tasked with really with a discernment process about ministries and about physical plans of all of the churches within the diocese. Can you speak to that at all, and how that might in some way, shape, or form relate to what we're doing?
Yeah, she asked, there is a diocesan initiative to look at all the property in the diocese and address what needs to be improved, etc. Beyond that, I don't know anymore. I do know 3 months ago, I met, I'm blanking on his name, I met with someone who is part of that group in the diocesan level. And he said they were looking at building these type of elder care places. Church of the Resurrection being one. And so he said ideally for the diocese to really get involved and build some sort of senior living, they need at least 5 acres. Well, we just bought 2. So some of the initiatives they are following, we don't really fit the size, the scope of what they're doing. But they are well aware that we now have this property, and they want to help us figure out what to do with it.
And we have been participating through Catalina's office with strategic planning piece too, because as that initiative goes forward, what are we doing on our strategic plan? How's that going to fit in with some of the things that the diocese has had? So we've had some good conversations with them about that. So I think they also plan to pull that in. And they're actually going to have a requirement that each church have a strategic plan, not that it has to be completely blessed by the diocese, but that everyone has a strategic plan by 2018. So we got that covered. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was just going to say, when you leave, I'm sure you'll think of a million things you should have asked. Please reach out to your vestry. Some of us that are here today, think of if you have other questions, how does this fit in with this, or what about this? Please reach out, please ask us, email us, call us, get us here, whatever, because we really want to make sure that we hear from you and that we have any questions, any concerns, and also make sure that we keep you all advised about what's going on in time. Any questions?
Just a reminder that our new website, you would go and visit that. I would like to thank Emily for her work in that. I have to mention it because Emily, the web developer, and I have spent way too much time. 2 months. I'm glad it's done. So please do check that out. And again, whatever significant changes come about, we will communicate that through all the ways we communicate. So if you haven't heard anything for a few weeks, don't think that means anything. As you all probably can guess or well aware of, the wheels of county government don't. The wheels of county government and the church don't move as quickly as we may want. But there are, I think, some wonderful, exciting things ahead. And again, what I mentioned at last year's annual meeting, when I announced we had purchased the property, you all are to be thanked for that. You all have contributed to this next chapter. So thank you on behalf of the vestry and the trustees. Thank you all for what you've done over all these years to get us to this point. Go in peace.